Hey everyone, I just got back from Seattle a few hours ago and I am not going to write a tournament report, so we are going to do a deck list update video. And you will see pretty quickly that this is not version 4.1, this is actually what I've been calling version 4.2. So if you're a follower of the spreadsheet, you'll see that I've had it as like shh, no secrets, all that good stuff. Well, this is it. The list is pretty much the same as 4.1 for the main deck. Nothing's changed there. All of the changes are in the sideboard. So when talking to AJ Kerrigan and a few other members of the Epic Storm team, we decided that green wasn't really pulling its weight anymore. Miracles has been trending down despite how it did at GP Seattle. The numbers of the deck are not super high anymore, and even so, not all lists are running Counterbalance. So we decided to cut the green. I think the loss of green, the biggest card lost is Xanad Swarm, like Abrupt Decay isn't needed. And another reason we did it is that Echoing Truth is actually way overperforming with version 4.2, or I'm sorry, version 4.1. So we decided that we wanted to go back up to 3 Echoing Truth like we did about a year ago before the resurgence of Miracles. And Echoing Truth has been phenomenal. One of the biggest changes you'll see here is the 4th copy of Chromax on the sideboard. This is in there because someone mentioned it in the TES mailbox and we started testing it, and it was really good. So you board it in any matchup where you want to become faster, so like Death and Taxes, Prison Decks, Eldrazi, lands, anything like that. And you even board it against Grixis Delver. So against Grixis Delver, what you do is you board in the 4th Mox, and then you would board in 2 copies of Empty the Warrens, and you would board out 2 copies of Burning Wish and a Ponder. So what this does is it allows your ad nauseams to still be very effective even though you have 3/4s in your deck, and it helps turbocharge out your Empty the Warrens. So it has a dual purpose, and it's just been solid. It's probably not for the people out there that hate Chrome Mox, likely a lot of Ant players, but looks like I accidentally deleted those. Whoops. There we go. I don't know what I did, but why does it say 59? There's still 3 Chromax, 4 Wish. I think it's just metal bugging out. Anyway. So the other 2 changes are Cyborg Cabal Therapy and Pulverize. These are in there in the Xanad Swarm slots because Chromax is taking the place of Bayou and there's 2 Echoing Truth over 2 Abrupt Decay. So these 2 slots are flex spots in my opinion. The Cabal Therapy gets more use out of being boarded in than it does being Burning Wish for in my experience. And the Pulverize is there because the rise of Dragon Stompy over the last month. And one of the things you'll notice is there's actually only 2 mountains. But against a deck like Dragon Stompy, they're actually going to give you mountains, making it a little more reliable. It's less reliable against decks like lands or Eldrazi, but it's a theoretical out. When I first started testing 4.2, this was a flex spot, so it was actually a it was actually a Bifrost for 1 league, and it was a Telemann Performance for 2 leagues before I ended up settling on Pulverize. So if you look at the spreadsheet, you'll see that there was a couple wins with Telemann Performance that was originally cut. And I think that's about it. As far as changes go, I could see the Pulverize being cut. I could see the Cabal Therapy being cut for something that helps against 4-color decks like Pile or Grixis Delver, but I'm not even sure what I would add at the moment. So for now, these will be here, but I am very, very, very confident on this package and no green. So that's version 4.2. I recommend everyone try it out. It performed well. I went 7-1 day 1 before crashing day 2. I beat lands round 1 and then just lost 4 rounds in a row. One of which was my own fault, but we're about to get to that. So, because I'm not going to write a tournament report, I am going to go over some of my matches. I'm just going to open up my spreadsheet really quick. Probably should have done that beforehand. Okay, so you can see that this is the spreadsheet, and we're going to go down to this weekend's event. So, GP Seattle. I had 2 buys, so my round 3 was actually my first round against Davi Paulino. He was on 4-color control. Our game 1 was incredible. It was like a 35-minute long game 1 where I had emptied the warrants for 10 on turn 3. And he ends up bolted 1, bringing me down to 9, and then played a Deathray and a Leovold. And I attacked him a bunch, and then I actually made a second empty the warrants and got him down to 2 life before he stabilized. It was a really good match, and, well, it was a really good game, in which I ended up grape-shotting a Deathrite Shaman and a Leovold to death after they blocked, which made the game even closer, so that was like pretty interesting, but ultimately I ended up losing game 1. Game 2, I had a line that was a little sketchy, so I knew that my opponent could hardcast Force, and from there they had a Surgical Extraction in their hand, and my hand consisted of Lotus Petal, Infernal Tutor, Lion's Eye Diamond. So my line was to play all those cards, get to Storm 10, and then hope that my opponent conceded, or if they didn't concede, they cast Empty the Warrens, and hope they don't hope they don't Surgical Extraction my Cabal Therapy in my graveyard, because I knew that they had Toxic Delusion in their hand. But instead, they Surgical Cabal Therapy in response to my Ad Nauseam, saw my hand, and then let Ad Nauseam resolve because I was at 9. And because they thought that if they countered the Ad Nauseam that I would Tendrils them to death. So they let it resolve from 9 life. Well, this being the Epic Storm, I got there. So, you know, people are always familiar in Grand Prix, and it wasn't a terrible play. It's just not everyone knows the differences between TES and ANT. So I won my game 2 like that, and then my game 3 was a simple turn 3 Cabal Therapy or Force Ad Nauseam kill you. So that was my first round. My second round was against Corey Burkhart. He's a pro player. He recently top-8 at a Pro Tour with Grixis in Modern, so I knew that he would be on a 4-color deck of sorts. And I don't think he knew I was on Storm because both of his hands weren't that great. His deck just had so much removal in it, I don't think he could board it all out. So that was a pretty easy victory. My match against Keenan was super disappointing and honestly a little bit of a heartbreaker at the time. So he wins the die roll mulligans and goes fetch go, and I make 16 goblins and he concedes. And then game 2, he goes land, Mox Diamond, pitching a fetch land, go. I play Gitaxian Probe, see that his hand is Green Sun Zenith, a land, and a Nut of the Reliquary. So this puts me in a little bit of an awkward spot where I pretty much have to win this turn with my hand. Otherwise he's going to have Gaddock Teague on the next turn or a Knight. So I cast Ad Nauseam. I've used 2 Chromoxes, but I've boarded in the 4th. So I have 2 Chromox, 4 Lotus Petals in my deck. And I went all the way down to 3 life. And I revealed an Echoing Truth and a Chain of Vapor in that time period. But I had drawn over 20 cards, and in my head the math was very good for me to hit one of those 6 still, and if I only hit 1, I could Chain of Vapor back another Mox, and then sacrifice my single land to bounce another Mox, and then from there I had a kill. So I decided that I would reveal 1 more card because there's only like 4 2-mana cost cards left in my deck, and I hit the 3rd copy of Echoing Truth. So that put me in a really awkward spot because my opponent had a fetch land in play so they could search up Dryad Arbor. So I flipped again and died. So that was pretty unfortunate. And then game 3, I can't remember if I mulliganed or not, or if it was just like kind of a loose keep, but it had a discard spell and a bounce spell on it. So I play a discard spell, and I take... Was it a discard spell? It might have been a probe. So I saw that my opponent's hand had double Mox Diamond, Liliana, Knight with double Wasteland, but they only had one colored source, so they ended up keeping the colored source and ditching the Wastelands and played a turn 1 Liliana the Veil. And then I ended up playing Echoing Truth on their Moxes, so they were all cut off mana other than a single land. So they started plussing and discarding their Moxes, and I bounced the Liliana, and then later discarded both the Liliana and the Knight. So that became a really interesting game because I had very few resources and so did they. But then he played a Dark Confidant, and there was back-to-back turns where he had drawn a card to stall me for one turn, and then I had drawn a card where I could go off again the following turn, and then I was just a turn behind the second one that did me in. So it was a super close match, but I ended up like just losing, and it was a little bit defeating because you win game 1 and then you resolve ad nauseum turn 1, game 2, and you think that, wow, I'm about to be 5-0, and then it just didn't happen. So it was a little rough, but like sometimes you make the right play and it doesn't pan out, because I could have gotten Empty the Warrens there and made Empty the Warrens for 14-16. The issue is you're banking on your opponent not having a Tabernacle in their deck. So because my opponent could play Knight of the Reliquary, I would swing and then they would get Tabernacle, and then from there I'm just like very, very far behind. Another thought was that I could have passed, but the problem is I don't have a whole lot of initial mana sources, so like they could end step fetch for Dryad Arbor, untap, Green Sun Zenith for Gaddock Teak, and then I could bounce it. But at this point, every single turn my mana would be tied up into bouncing a Gaddock Teak, and they would also be drawing Wastelands or other lands to cast other spells. So it was actually like not a good spot to be in. Yeah. So my next match against Nick was on Eldrazi. I won the die roll, or no, I'm sorry, he won the die roll and just played a turn 1 Eye of Ugin, and I played Petal Brainstorm, and I was like, oh, I have to hit a third Rite of Flame or Lion's Eye Diamond, but instead I actually just hit the one of Empty the Warrens and was able to empty and then steal game 1. Game 2, I was very close to winning, but he drew a Wasteland to cut me off of being able to bounce his Sphere Resistance and that turn, because if I bounced it, he would just recast it. So that was a little awkward. And then game 3, I was convinced I was dead, and my opponent had a turn 1 Sphere, and then I started playing my Chrome Moxes in order to get mana sources in play, and I even played a Gitaxian Probe just to dig. So my opponent has an Eldrazi Mimic in play and then plays a Smasher, and I realized that my only outs are drawing exactly Chain of Vapor, so I can Chain of Vapor targeting my Mox and then sack a land to bounce the Sphere, and then I have one land in play, so I could tap this basic Swamp for a black Ritual, play the Mox, play Lion's Eye Diamond, Infernal Tutor, Burning Wish Tendrils for lethal, because I think my opponent was around like 14-16. So I realized this, but I needed to draw the Chain of Vapor. Alternatively, if I drew Echoing Truth, I could bounce it, but then my Probe in my hand would have to draw a land or a Lotus Petal. So I actually ended up drawing the Chain of Vapor and like almost lost it in my seat because I was like pretty sure I was dead. So after losing to 4-color Loam, I felt like I had stolen a match. So like it was almost a break even. My next round against Yuki, once again, I just kind of crushed him. There wasn't really much to go about it. I kind of just like did better things than my opponent. They kept hands with removal instead of counter magic, and I just did the TES thing. Same thing against Elves. They weren't really games. Game 1, I Burning Wish for Dark Petition. It was one of the only times I cast Dark Petition on the weekend, but it ended up winning me the game, where I don't think Goblins would have if Dark Petition wasn't in the board. My match against Zachary Wong was pretty interesting. So I win the die roll and I cast Ponder, and my hand is Ritual, Petal, Lion's Eye Diamond. And I think to myself, it'd be nice if I could draw into Probe discards, or Probe into Business Spell, because then I could actually see what they're on before going to board. And I actually pondered into probe ad nauseum, so I paid 2 life going down to 17, then drew the ad nauseum, saw that he was on lands. It was a very gorgeous deck. It was also all Japanese foil, including his Mox Diamonds, which were altered. And then I killed him. Game 2 was a super long game where I Burning Wish for Pulverize, but he drew Crop Rotation, and then Crop Rotation for a Wasteland to destroy my second mountain. And from there I still had outs, but I had to burn a bounce spell on a Merit Leech, so it actually like slowed me down quite a bit. And then game 3, I had both basics in play and 2 Moxes after he played 2 Sphere Resistance, and I eventually got up to 4 mana, echoing Truth to Spheres after he represented lethal because he had Stage Depths and lands in play on turn 4. So I untapped and then ad nauseamed, bounced all my Moxes, replayed them, and killed him. It was actually a very close match. I think that people think that the lands matchup is very lopsided when in fact it's not. So if you look here, I'm at 75%. It feels like it shouldn't be that good, but the games tend to be pretty close. And then my next matchup was against Marcel, who is GSY on Moto. And he actually knew what my list was, so I had a gut feeling, and it's hard to describe this, but he played Underground Sea Go, and I figured that was a little strange, like just not having anything. So he was either on Delver with like Stifle or Spell Pierce in hand, or he was Ant. So I played, I think it was a basic Swamp and passed, and then he played a second copy of Underground Sea and played a Delver's Secrets. So on my turn, I played Volcanic Island, and I cast Dark Ritual, which resolved, and then Rite of Flame, then Lotus Petal, and I cast Burning Wish, and he thinks for a second, says resolves. I get Empty the Warrens, play Lion's Eye Diamond, Chrome Mox, and at this point the last card in my hand is Burning Wish, and then I cast Empty, and he stifles me, and I knew that there could be a chance that he had Stifle, but Stifle isn't very commonly played anymore in Grixis Delver, but I had a gut feeling from the Underground Sea pass play that he likely had Stifle or Pierce. Alternatively, what I could have done was, with the first Burning Wish, get Cabal Therapy and name Stifle. But the issue with doing this is, I can then Burning Wish or Empty the Warrens and cast it, but I lose to Daze or Spell Pierce. So, if you're playing the odds game, you always play around the more common card. So in this situation, the most common card was Daze and not Stifle. Alternatively, if this discard spell was Thoughtseize might have been a better line, but he actually ended up having both, I believe. So it just like wasn't that good, because a couple turns later I went off and he had a Daze in hand, so it was just like kind of bad. And then game 2, I mulliganed, went turn 1 Ritual Petal, Rite of Flame, and he force willed my Rite of Flame, and my last card was Empty the Warrens. Oh, I had a land as well, but even if none of that happened, he went turn 1 Deathrite, turn 2 Cantrip Deathrite, so like my 8 goblins wouldn't have beaten them. Even 10 goblins wouldn't have beaten that draw. So I kind of just got crushed. Round after that, I faced 4 color, where my opponent mulled the 5 on the play and played a Deathrite Shaman. I played Durasin, then saw land, Daze, which was pretty strange, and Kalgan's Command. So I take the Daze, and then my opponent draws, plays land, passes, I draw Cantrip, and my opponent then draws, plays land. Actually, I don't think they played land, I think they just passed. And then I go off on my turn, and their 2 cards that they had drawn the previous 2 turns were Force of Will blue card. So they mulliganed to 5 and had that. So it was like slightly like frustrating that it happened, but that is Magic. So game 2, I have a turn 2 Empty the Warrens for 14, which gets there. And then game 3, it was a heartbreaker, because my opponent drew 4 or 5 cards in a row that were absolutely perfect to stop me, and I just felt like it was one of those rounds where you knew that today wasn't going to be a good day based on this, because it was like Forcible off the top, and then a discard spell followed by back-to-back surgical extractions, and then a land so that he could snap hen me. So I understand like not all of them seem perfect, but like how the game had played out, they were all very good draws because I had a Rite of Flame, which ended up getting surgical, then produced 2 instead of 3, which made my Infernal Tutor not be able to get Empty the Warrens and a bunch of other things. So it was just a little rough. And at this point, I still cared about the event, but knowing that I was dead for top 8 made it not feel so great. So I'm playing against Hunter Nance the next round at Grixis Delver. We have a pretty good first 2 games, and then game 3, I think I got in my own head a little too much. So he plays a Cabal Therapy on turn 1. I was on the play though, and had a Brainstorm in my hand. So I quickly say it resolves, and he ends up naming Infernal Tutor. And I have Probe, Land, Brainstorm, Empty the Warrens, Dark Ritual, and a Lotus Petal. So I end step Brainstorm, and he doesn't force it, or Daze. So I Brainstorm into Ad Nauseam and Chromox and another land, so I put the land on the bottom and then draw the Chromox. And in my head, I'm thinking about how I can try to save the Ad Nauseam, so in case he draws a sweeper, I'll be able to possibly come back. And I'm thinking multiple turns in advance and thinking like how the game is going to play out. And I lose track of what's happening in front of me, and I just cast Dark Ritual without thinking, and he snap forces it. So the play would have actually been to play Chromox, imprint Ad Nauseam, cast Cabal Therapy, name his Force of Will that I knew from the Gitaxian Probe that I had, and then play Dark Ritual, Lotus Petal, Empty, and then from there I can flashback Cabal Therapy and hit. He didn't have any creatures in his hand, so I probably would have taken the Ponder. Or just taken the Ponder with the first Cabal Therapy because it was his only blue card. So instead I just ended up losing, and as we were picking up he told me that he doesn't have a single answer in his deck for a Horde of Goblin tokens. So I knew for a fact that I had just punted, and at this point I was X and 4. And X and 4 did not cash GP Vegas, but it did end up cashing this. And my last round was against Esper Delver, where my opponent's deck was just set up to beat Storm. They had main deck Thoughtseizes, Stifles, Spell Pierces, Daze, Force. They had sideboard Zealous Persecutions. Like, it just wasn't even close. Like, I stole game 1, but I knew that after game 1 it was going to be very tough to win 2 more. And they had Flusterstorms and other things post-board. So once you start sliding like that, you end up facing people that have, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but decks that aren't built to win tournaments. So this guy just like clearly didn't want to lose the combo, which is fine, but I felt like his deck wasn't built to beat decks like Lands or anything else because he had focused so much on not losing to Storm or Sneak and Show or whatever. So at this point I was feeling pretty defeated and decided to drop and not play out the last 2 rounds because 10 and 5 doesn't mean anything to me, and I stood in line to get cards signed. So that was my Grand Prix Seattle. I do think that the deck could use something else in the board to help beat Grixis Delver and or 4-color. I beat 4-color 3 times on day 1. Unfortunately I lost to it twice on day 2, but I should have won the second time if I just like wasn't an idiot. And I also think that like exhaustion did play a little bit into there. It's just 7 rounds on day 2 is a lot, and they didn't announce it, but day 2 actually started at 10, so we woke up early so we could get breakfast beforehand, and we were at the event site at 9, actually before 9, ready to go, and they just didn't say anything, and it started at 10, so we just waited around for an hour, which could have been another hour of rest. So we'll go back to the deck list. This is version 4.2. This could be Thoughtseize, but honestly, with the amount that I boarded it in, and when you're boarding in additional copies of Empty, it's usually better being a Cabal Therapy, but it could be Thoughtseize. I'm definitely not sold on Pulverize. It was fine, but it's not necessarily needed. And if I can figure out something to help beat Grixis Stalber, I think I'd rather have that in that slot. So I think that's all I have to say for now. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, feel free to put it in the comments below. I will answer. Thanks for watching.